If we have a standard and then a certification that says, yes, in fact, this person met this standard, that gives a level of trust to the buyers. That changes the perception of sales.
Welcome to the Emblazers show, where B2B leaders are igniting revenue. I'm your host, Abby Kerr. When you think about professions like accounting, law, or engineering, there are clear standards and certifications that define what good looks like. But as you probably know, in sales, that really hasn't been a thing, at least not until very recently. Well, that's just the beginning of the conversation that my co-host Tim Riesterer is going to have today with our guest, Rob Durant. Rob is CEO of U.S. operations at the Institute of Sales Professionals, and he has spent more than 20 years helping organizations improve how they sell, working across sales leadership, sales enablement, training, and customer service. His career started with the Walt Disney Company, where he learned the fundamentals of world-class customer service. From there, he went on to build a successful career in sales and sales leadership, eventually focusing on coaching and developing other sellers. At his core, Rob describes himself as a teacher. That passion for mentoring and developing people has taken him from corporate sales teams to startup environments, and now to the Institute of Sales Professionals, where he's working to elevate the sales profession through content, certification, and community. He's also the host of the podcast Sales TV Live, which you can catch on LinkedIn. Let's go to the episode right now.
Hey, I'm excited about this today. Rob, thanks for joining our podcast. We're going to tackle the issue of the professionalism of the sales profession. And we call it a profession. Hey, I'm in the sales profession. But in reality, when we ask anyone to practice law or be an accountant or practice medicine or pretty much just about any other quote unquote profession, we ask them to certify on it and prove that they can do it before they're actually allowed to be employed and do it. But yet in sales, we'll give a seller a $50 million territory with zero formal training or formal professionalism. How does that happen? And do we need to do anything about that from your perspective?
Short answer, yes. But first, Tim, thank you so much for having me here. In answer to the question, do we need to do something about it? I believe there are jobs and there are careers. To me, a job is when you are assigned a set of tasks and you complete them. The tasks you complete today will be no different from the tasks you are asked to complete tomorrow. And there's no expectation of fundamentally developing your skill set when it comes to completing those tasks. A career, on the other hand, also has daily tasks, but the difference is that as a professional, expectations are that you are continually working to improve your performance and expand your skill set. Professional development is fundamental to all professional standards. And the ISP, the Institute of Sales Professionals, has one goal: to elevate the profession of sales. Like you alluded to, Tim, sales is the only profession where I can wake up tomorrow, change my LinkedIn headline to sales professional, and do the job. But that doesn't necessarily make me a professional. In fact, there is no shared standard that defines being a sales professional and what that actually means.
Hey, sales has been around forever, and I'm a big fan of Dan Pink, and he wrote the book To Sell as Human. So in some ways, it's just like what we do. That's the nature of us, is we're sellers. To your point, that's well put, that it isn't the same job. It's not a repetitive sort of task that could be automated. In fact, it's kind of funny. People were thinking that AI and automation would replace salespeople and said so a few years ago. And we still have salespeople. And in fact, in many ways, we're seeing results that say people need them more than ever because they're overwhelmed with the information and can't get to a decision. So it's actually valued and potentially becoming increasingly valued. And then there's going to be expectations from the customer standpoint that you perform at a certain level. Like if I'm going to value you, you got to do that. So how do we begin to ensure that when you encounter a seller, they're going to do certain things as opposed to you get what you get?
So how did we get here? I believe it's because most of us in our hearts know what the right thing to do is. In other words, we are ethical. In sales, most of us know in our guts what good tactics look like. We've learned from success and failures over the years, ours and others. And ultimately, we just know what to do and we do it. Nowhere has the profession collectively said, these are the foundational standards and best practices we agree upon. Because there aren't any shared professional standards, every company ends up reinventing sales capability, sales ethics, and sales training essentially from scratch. Each and every sales team is reinventing the wheel. I don't know about you, but that's not a mark of progress to me. Progress is because we're standing on the shoulders of the giants who came before us. We are moving forward, and that's what we're here to do.
Well, I feel it's like, in particular in B2B, I could say this about my dad who sold cars for 42 years as well. Like all of his life, it was because he knew more about the cars than the people buying the cars. And so as long as that was cool, and then he had the ability to develop some rapport and seem like a fairly trustworthy person, he could be successful. And I think in B2B too, like the first thing companies do is like, to be a seller, you got to be a product expert. And the way you're going to bring value is you're going to bring more product knowledge. But that kind of got blown up with the internet, as far as I'm concerned. Like all of a sudden, the thing that made you the difference maker and added value to the customer could go to your website and be smarter than you and more up to date than you and more comprehensive than you. So now you had to continue to bring value. And so I feel like we just kind of said, if you knew the product, you could be a seller. But there's this entire thing that has nothing to do with product knowledge that makes a great seller. So why have we resisted? Why has this been a gap pretty much all this time in terms of denoting a professional set of behaviors and characteristics, as opposed to, if you know the product, here's your quota, and if you hit it, you stay. If you don't, you go.
There are so many different ways I could take this, but let me start with this. What you talk about in terms of the buyers having more information than sellers these days. They do, because not only do they have access to all of the product information that the sellers have, the buyers have access to one piece of information that sellers will never have access to: their true motivation for buying. Even if I tell you why I'm interested in buying, that may be the truth, that may be what I'm saying, but my gut might be telling me something else. So in terms of more product knowledge, I remember there has recently been a statistic saying that buyers now prefer a seller-free experience 75% of the time. I've seen it quoted 80% of the time. I've seen it quoted 90% of the time. The fact of the matter is, buyers prefer a seller-free experience 100% of the time when you define that experience as pushing me into something I'm not ready for. However, a recent Gartner study came out and kind of refuted that initial research. I think rather than refuting it, it supported it. What it said was that buyers don't want a seller-free experience per se. What buyers want is guidance, thought leadership, and help on demand, if you will. When I have a question, I want a human I can go to, but I still don't want to be sold. And that to me is the critical difference.
Yeah, for sure. And so if we're going to professionalize and help people be held to and be able to actually recognize that they are being held to a certain standard, how do you begin to harden this idea of there are standards there and you can measure those standards? Where does one even begin to get to a place where that can be held consistently?
There's a lot of research out there regarding sales and best practices and so on. And it's not just a matter of, well, in my gut, I know this, or, we've always done it that way. But there's really no incentive for anyone to collect all of this information, aggregate this, and codify it. And that's what the Institute of Sales Professionals has set down to do, is to identify what in fact works and what we should promote collectively as a profession in terms of what good looks like.
Well, and I'm grateful that someone has. And the Institute of Sales Professionals, and that's why you're here, Rob, is emerging in the United States. I would say it's got a bit more of a toehold in the United Kingdom and maybe parts of Europe, but you're bringing this institute to the United States. And we have a global audience here, but a good chunk of them exist in the US, and you're importing it, I guess. So I would love for everybody to understand what it is, the Institute of Sales Professionals, what the certification is, and where that came from.
The Institute of Sales Professionals has been in existence in the UK for just over 10 years now. In fact, we just celebrated our milestone of 10,000 members. What we have done is put together a set of capabilities, and we've put them into a framework, the sales capability framework. And with that, we've also created a sales capability assessment designed to identify areas where individuals and organizations have strengths in sales fundamentals and areas of opportunities in sales fundamentals. As I said, it's been in the UK for a decade now. We are just now launching here in the US. We have recently launched in Canada. We will soon be launching our own chapters in India, in Portugal, in Brazil, and other global representation as the opportunities present themselves. Here in the US, we have an expansion strategy that's centered around best practices as identified by the sales capability framework, and partnering with organizations who are looking for world-class certification of their training and salespeople, organizations who are providing world-class training and development and certifying their training and development aligned with the sales capability framework. And one other element that we're particularly proud of here in the US is aligning with colleges and universities, specifically those offering sales majors, sales minors, and sales certifications. Because we believe that if we want to ensure the future of sales and sales certifications, we should probably start with those who will be developing the future of sales.
So many things you said there that I want to unpack. You talked about a sales capability framework, and then a certification, and then the partnership with the university. So let's see if I can take those in order. The sales capability framework, like you said, it's been around for 10 years. It's been vetted and now has 10,000 members subscribing to it. What was the genesis or the source of that said, this is the canon, if you will, this is what the holistic seller behavior, skill, attributes should look like? How did that framework come to be?
Sure. It was really motivated by the things that you mentioned at the beginning of the episode. Medicine has it. Legal has it. Accounting has it. Teaching has it. Sales does not. And in the UK, there is a thing recognized as chartered organizations. That is, organizations whose goal is really to promote a given field of study, a given profession. And that's overseen by their Office of Quality and Standards, Ofqual. And that is what we did. We went to Ofqual and said, we want to formalize the profession of sales. We want to provide sales certifications. At this time, the ISP is the only organization that has been authorized by Ofqual to issue these sales certifications. And That was no small achievement. That took years of working back and forth with the office, and we are audited annually in terms of financial wherewithal, in terms of rigor, academic rigor and standards. And we set out to ensure that this is a third party acknowledgement that is meaningful, not simply a certificate of attendance, if you will.
It's funny because many times companies are like they want or they conceive of an idea of a certificate or certification. And to your point, it is really just to say, I did the thing. Doesn't say I did it well, doesn't say that I can do it with a level of consistent proficiency. And so I think the idea of actually having a third party involved who validates the framework and all that goes with it is an important advance in creating more professional sellers and even having companies and their programs be validated. So I like what you said then about that you guys are coming to validate individuals and determine that they meet this criteria, but also companies and their current programs. Like you are going to come in, audit and certify an individual and or the company and or their existing program as to whether or not it gets this certification. Did I get that right?
You did. And the value to the organization there is that they start to understand whether or not they're even training the right things. We spend billions of dollars each year in training and development, sales included. But how much of that is retained after 30 days? I believe I read a statistic recently that says 70% of it is not retained after 30 days. I'm not saying that certification is going to necessarily increase retention, but I will say that if you are training the right things and they're using those right things correctly, it will improve performance, which will, of course, improve retention of those right things.
It feels to me like at some point, being an organization that wants to be able to present themselves as having a quality program, you can just say it, or you can say we have a quality program and somebody else has said this meets a certain standard and is certified. And there's value to attracting talent. There's maybe value to the customer to know that our teams are trained to a certain level of certification so that you can trust both the quality and the consistency of our sellers.
That's exactly how I think about it. In fact, one of the first assessments we provide our members is a sales ethics certification. I said earlier, most people are good, and we know what ethical looks like. Sure. But if we have a standard and then a certification that says, yes, in fact, this person met this standard, that gives a level of trust to the buyers. And my favorite part about the sales ethics certification is not simply that it's a somewhat robust exam. It's the fact that before you even sit for the exam, the first question, if you will, is you agreeing to maintain the ethical standards within the ISP. That pledge in and of itself, to me, is as valuable as the robust certification that you've completed. If we collectively say, we know this to be the right thing to do, and we commit to doing it, that changes the perception of sales.
It feels foundational. It's kind of like they're pledging a certain level of interaction and performance, and that the buyer on the other side can hold them accountable to it as well. So ethics certification, are there different types of and multiple tiers of certification that you guys have built and have validated?
Right now, it's the foundational level. And as I say, that's really structured around the commitment to it. As we work with additional training providers, as we work with our own demands and needs, we expect to expound upon this. We expect to provide help for leaders in demonstrating the ability, in training and coaching to the ethics and standards, as well as all of the other capabilities that we have identified in the framework.
What if your next big revenue move didn't come from a blog post or a cold LinkedIn scroll, but from a real conversation with leaders who've been there?
As the world of sales is constantly evolving and constantly changing, I think it's even more critical to get together with people to understand how are they helping to solve some of the problems that our buyers have today.
Meet Emblaze, a community of sharp B2B minds, CROs, CSOs, rising stars, sharing what's actually working in sales, enablement, and customer growth.
We always find a lot of value in the partnerships that we're able to form with some of the other great organizations that are part of the team here. And personally, I love the opportunity to connect with my peer group outside of other organizations and learn from them and try to figure out if there's things that they're doing that we can pull into our organization and benefit from.
Join a monthly forum, dig into science-backed strategy, and get insight you won't find in your feed. Start your Emblaze journey today at emblazegrowth.com.
One of the things that you said, Rob, that I think is important because our audience is made up mostly of B2B companies and their respective sales enablement, sales training leaders, is there's people out there, sales managers, sales training, sales enablement, who are like, wait, we do a lot of training. Well, I'll be honest, I've been in this for like 30 years. I haven't seen like a core sales ethics training. So I think that's a foundational thing to be certified on, that both the companies and their customers would agree would be a good thing, and have that validated by a third party. Awesome. But you also said that you are looking to come in with this capability framework that has been validated by this third party and review people's current programs for how they support the framework, and they can receive, their program can be certified by this third party. That's something you guys do?
Absolutely. And the reason behind that is, again, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that you're training the right things to the right people at the right time. One of my first roles in enablement with a tech startup, I was approached by 3 different sales managers within the scope of 24 hours, each asking me the same question. The quarter had just ended, and they came to me and said, Rob, can you teach my people closing skills? I had a rep who missed quota by 1 deal. If they could have just closed 1 more deal, they would have hit quota. My answer to them is always yes and. Yes and is a great answer when you're in enablement. You never want to answer no. But doing what they wanted would really not have given them the results they were looking for. So yes and. Yes, I will provide them, your team, a closing training. And you and I will sit down and we'll work on evaluating each rep at each stage in our sales process. So you will be better equipped to provide them the individual coaching they need in the stage where they need it at the time they need it most. Because the reality is this, Tim, if I give the team closing training, first of all, that presumes everyone on the team has the same deficiency. We just know that's not the case. Second, there is no sense in me teaching closing skills if the deals didn't get to the closing stage in the first place. So let's go back and evaluate. Was it the demo? Was it the discovery? Was it the outreach? Do you have an organization and clarity problem, or do you have a lack of willpower to do the job? There is no closing training in the world that will overcome lack of will. There's no training at all. Well, there's one, and I've provided it once, resume training. But once we identify what good looks like and where people have need, we can then provide assessments against a common benchmark. Well, the industry standard for this is that. And when organizations come to us with their training programs, we can align them with our capabilities and share with them the industry benchmarks that would make them look good in the industry or provide them exactly the area of opportunity for future development?
I think that the question, I think, for companies is going to be, are they seeking a level of certification of their sales development programs and sales coaching and enablement and training to the degree that they want to be able to promote and believe it's important to promote that they have certified sellers that have been certified by something other than themselves, or even other than by their own training company or their training partners, but a third party. And that's what's drawn me to the Institute of Sales Professionals, to be honest, is that even as a company, Corporate Visions, we sell sales training skills, but having a third party certification feels like it's sort of that next level. You mentioned universities earlier. Like, there are more and more universities that have degree programs. And so there is an opportunity to be hiring professionally trained, bachelor degreed, so-called salespeople, which is cool. I think there's 160 some just in the United States alone, and more, I'm sure, globally. How do you guys interact with them? If that feels academic, they get a diploma that says I'm good at sales. How does the ISP fit in a world where we're maybe producing a few more actual degreed salespeople?
I used to joke they don't teach sales in college. I can't make that joke anymore because they actually do. Not in my day, but they do now. How do we work with organizations, institutions? Exactly that. We partner with them. We provide their students free access to our platform, free membership in our platform. We provide the sales capability assessments and the sales capability frameworks, and we work with them to align what they're already teaching in the classroom to our set of standards, such that when somebody graduates from an institution with a degree in sales, not only do they have a degree in sales, they have an ISP certification that supports it. Because the expectation is that soon enough, when you are seeking employment, it won't just be that, well, I have this degree in sales. It will be, okay, but prove the value of that. And that's really what we're getting at altogether with ISP and certification, whether it's through a university or through a corporate partner. It's about proving the return on investment. And we have already done some studies with our clients in the UK that have shown when sellers are active with the ISP and continue to work on the certified professional development, it has led to 10 to 16% increases in sales performance in 1 year. That alone is a great motivation for organizations to perk up and go, well, how did that happen? And then when we help you start training the things that are important to your organization as assessed by the sales capability assessment, when we start comparing those things to the industry benchmarks and help you identify maybe some areas of opportunities, and not just areas of opportunities, but certified training organizations that are ready, willing, and able to help fill in those gaps, then what we're doing is elevating the profession of sales.
I appreciate that. I think it's, you like stories. Here's my story. I recently worked with a consulting firm, big name consulting firm, that have partners and principals and all the levels of consulting. And their sales methodology, I would argue, was serendipity. Like, hey, if I was just there and we were working on a project, maybe I'd hear about something else and I could, win some business. And they realized they needed much more structured serendipity, which is just a euphemism for they needed sales training. And it sort of came out as like a dirty word, like, we don't do sales. And what I appreciate about this entire conversation is that the Institute of Sales Professionals is working to eliminate that as even something somebody thinks anymore about sales, that it can be a profession that can be certified, and expectations can be that you're going to see a certain consistent execution and experience that you can trust, and that it'll be meaningful for you as a buyer, a decision maker. With the last question, I guess what I would say is, we mentioned this was a UK governing body that has given third-party validation to this. Is that transferable? I guess I'm just curious, like if I'm in the States and I'm a seller and I now I'm certified by the ISP, which is a valid third-party validated certification. I guess maybe that's part of the goal, right? You want to continue to help everyone see that is a meaningful, valid certification.
Absolutely. We are working to make this the global standard. And as you mentioned, it is overseen by the United Kingdom government. They have an office dedicated to this type of advancing professionalism. The US doesn't have anything like that. Even the organizations that issue credentials here in the US have come about simply because a bunch of people in that profession got together and said, we should do something about this. Perfectly valid. But there was no third party from the onset saying, yes, you're meeting a set of qualified standards, or you're just kind of guessing at it. Absent a department here in the US that offers similar type of, I guess the word is scrutiny, then I am content with leaning into the rigor that Ofqual has held the ISP accountable to.
I can't argue with that. We have formed associations that are really not associations. They're for-profit groups and communities, and they're trying to say, here, this is meaningful, or it's a nonprofit that's tried to get together and say, this is meaningful. But the reality is, what is the objective scrutiny, to your point, that has said this is certifiable in a good way? Rob, it's been a pleasure. Good luck with the ISP and the bringing it here to the U.S. And when I met you and heard about it, I thought, yeah, I got to get you on the show because people should look into this. I think if people are serious about how they denote their teams as having met a bar relative to the professionalism of sales, both for their own performance and knowledge and their customers, here's a place to start, everybody. So check out the ISP, the Institute for Sales Professionals. What's the web address they can go to, Rob?
ISP-US.org.
ISP-US.org. All right, Rob. Hey, thanks. Good luck with everything. Hope to check in with you from time to time to see how that's going. But hopefully folks will be checking into it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tim.
Thank you for watching another great episode of the Emblazers Show. Thank you to our guest, Rob Durant, and thank you to my co-host, Tim Riesterer. Did you know that the Emblaze Revenue Community by Corporate Visions recently got a website upgrade? Go to corporatevisions.com/community to see it and to learn all about what membership entails. And we would absolutely love to have you join us inside the community. We'll see you here next time.